Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whenever you happenstance into this incredible panel discussion with the new Untouchables. We are recording on Friday, July 11th, 2025 at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. And my friends, it has been a whirlwind week. I think I want to just start with some commentary and hopefully back into your expertise, but we'd be remiss not to just start with the damage that's happening in our country. I mean, we started off with this incredible flood, this flash flood in Texas that was so tragic. And obviously, I think thus far as I think we're over 170 lives, both lost or missing and unaccounted for. But in a situation that brought up all sorts of questions regarding, obviously, warning systems and the type of things that I think that those of us who have grown up in a country as a superpower have just grown accustomed to, we having some of the best technology and science and everything else that has all been practically rug pulled by this administration to the effect that death is the consequence, which has been a reoccurring theme, of course, from you, Bill, especially, that when we enable and allow for malfeasance and deregulation and the runaway train wreck of really, I guess, spiting ourselves for budget, for what purpose unending disaster is going to happen. Do you care to comment based on that tragedy, as well as obviously the passing of the big, beautiful bill?
Yeah, so it's basic criminology that when people lie, people die. Folks think that fraud only leads to loss of money. That's not true. It's a leading cause of death globally and has been for centuries. Just think of tobacco and other such things. And again, what was it? It was a campaign of lies for 80 years on health in those circumstances. As we've talked about here in particular, when it becomes a litmus test to become a senior member of the administration, that you are willing to lie, that you have to lie about the elections and everything else. Um, Most people who have, well, certainly anyone has any moral restraints, but anyone who has any real abilities will not work in that organization. So instead of being the best of the best and, of if you defer to the robber barons, you get abundance and such, you get the rule of the worst people and the worst people who are also afraid to death of coming across the dear leader. And who knows what the dear leader means because there was a Twilight Zone episode, I think, of a 12-year-old kid who had unlimited powers, and if you pissed him off, he just killed you instantly. And it's so everyone is walking around on eggshells, going crazy around him. That's what we live in now, right? These folks are scared to death of getting on the wrong side of Donald Trump. They don't know what Donald Trump wants done. It certainly isn't competence. It's just all headlines and such. So they do routinely things that will get people killed, like just plain waiting on aid, like being opposed to science. I mean, this is the guy, remember, at the top that wanted to nuke hurricanes and who wrote, in his Sharpie, the fake portion of where the supposed prediction of the hurricane path was, so that his lie would become allegedly truth. In that kind of group, you're going to have fantastic amount of losses, and then of course, right at the beginning, with this destruction of USAID, that's going to be over 10 million people, but we'll never see those people, right? They will die in silence with no cameras 10,000 miles from us.
10 million is a low number.
Really, Paul? Yeah, I was compelled to turn to you because you said at the outset, like several months ago, hundreds of thousands of people were going to die as a result of this. You're literally putting that number, that figure, that high at this stage?
I don't think I said hundreds of thousands. I think I said millions. And the reality is that
Yeah.
the reality is that they've provided life-saving HIV medication, both through USAID and through the CDC, for over 35 million people. Without that medication, they die. And I would say 30% of the medication that they provided was to children. So this is a genocide. And I don't even like to think about it. But to bring it back to what you were talking about, what happened in Texas, I think a lot of, and this hits close to home to me. My wife was a camp counselor at Cape Mystic when, at Camp Mystic when she was in college, right? And so it's a wonderful camp, been there for 100 years. When she was there, it wasn't a Christian camp as far as she remembers, but apparently it is now. But the reality is, and where it breaks down to human life, right, is these Republicans have been talking for years about cost of everything. Well, government is not a profit-making enterprise. It's not supposed to be. It never was. It's supposed to be taking care of people, taking care of the public, providing for them, right? And what we've seen over the last couple of days, uncovered through some very good investigative journalism, is that the money has been available to create these warning systems and implement warning systems that they knew would be necessary. But they've said they don't want to spend the money on it. And as a matter of fact, the governor of Texas gave back to taxpayers $53 million, but it might have been 53 billion. But he gave back money to taxpayers rather than spend it on these emergency warning systems that would have saved lives. So this whole notion that government is there to make money, if something is not cost effective, don't do it, is crazy. I mean that's not what FEMA is. That's not what it's supposed to be. And what they want to do is emasculate this stuff because it costs money. So rather than give billionaires or tax billionaires at the appropriate level that they should be taxed, so that they can provide these services to the poor and people that are vulnerable, they give them a tax break. And so this is all just symptomatic. And these deaths are a consequence of what the Republican or the MAGA crowd wants people to do or think about, how they want to think about government. I think it's atrocious. And I think people will die, and people have died. And this is a genocide internationally based upon what they're doing just with the HIV, with PEPFAR and with the HIV program. And it's crazy. And no one's talking about it.
Wow.
One friendly amendment. These things are cost effective. They're immensely cost effective, right?
No,
Well,
I agree, but they pretend they're not.
Right. I wouldn't mind weighing in really quickly because there's an aspect of this that is near and dear to my heart, and that's like a lot of the impugning of the National Weather Service that was happening initially. My father, of course, worked with the National Weather Service. And so I know it rather well from hanging out with him at his job every so often when I was a kid, and what really sort of bothered me was how early on, they were trying to place the blame on the National Weather Service, this federal department, right? Rather than taking responsibility themselves, because the National Weather Service, by all accounts, put out the appropriate warnings at the appropriate times. It was the fact that there weren't like these other systems that were in place, of course, but also the inaction that occurred from the local authorities who are then pointing their finger at the National Weather Service, and I just think that I just think that it's gross, the lack of accountability.
we're,
Yeah.
we're starting with a bang here that I didn't anticipate, and I'm so encouraged by the what we're all feeling, this frustration in the midst of this disaster. But June, I want to turn it to you briefly because your expertise has enlightened me and others that are going to discover more of your revelations that there has been a systemic engineered scenario that has basically shattered the American family over decades. And there's different methodologies and data that reveals all of these things. But when you start with Bill and you talk about deregulation and you go to some of the points that everybody's talked about, it almost feels like this thing is intended. I mean, how can we not? I mean, if it's budget, that's one thing, but it also seems to me at the level of this carnage that we're facing, I don't even know how you square that.
Well, but first of all, I want to connect what we've been talking about. There are a whole series of big lies. I mean, out there, what we hear is a denial that Trump budget cuts caused this disaster. But you've got the main person in the office responsible who took early retirement and was the guy coordinating efforts. It wasn't the weather forecasting. The weather forecasting was fine. It was getting the message to local authorities. And then you have the issue of infrastructure, which is not a question of being ready for this flood, but every disaster. So my dear friend Sapna Kumar, who moved recently from Houston to Minneapolis, posted on her Facebook page, hey, we know what Texas is like, but we were pleasantly surprised to see in Minnesota when there were tornado warnings, there were not just messages on her phone and on the TV if you were still up at midnight, but sirens, unmistakable sirens. And we all moved down to the more protected parts of the house. There were tornadoes, thankfully not in our neighborhood. No one was injured. And that infrastructure pays off. Sometimes, in the case of these floods, it pays off immediately in dramatic ways. It is cost effective. But let's now turn to the family. There are an increasingly rich set of studies. What is the most cost-effective investment government makes? It's in early childhood. The US emerged at the end of the 19th century as the best educated country in the world because places like Minnesota, but not the Deep South, embraced free public secondary education earlier than the rest of the world and educated girls as well as boys. The point of educating girls in that era is the investment in early childhood. So what are we doing now, aside from killing off campers? And I must say, I found this one heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking. But when you look at what we're doing with early childhood and the big ugly bill, it's very important to emphasize that the big expansion during the Clinton administration was the expansion of Medicaid to cover children and to cover, so 40% of all births are paid for by Medicaid. A higher percentage of children are covered by Medicaid than adults. What the bill does most fundamentally is make Medicaid into an insurance company. They want to cut costs to finance their tax cuts for the wealthy. How are they going to do it? Not by cutting all these people off Medicaid, but by doing what an insurance company would do, by putting in hoops that mean people who are eligible, who should be getting benefits, have to re-register twice a month. That's a bureaucracy. But let me start with a story. We wrote an article about this when there was a challenge to the work requirements in the first Trump administration. The lead plaintiff was a man in his 40s. He had cancer. He worked in construction. Construction is cyclical, and you can't depend on having a job every month. In addition, when he was undergoing chemo, he couldn't necessarily work. So what was happening is sometimes he worked. Sometimes he couldn't get work that month. Sometimes he might have gotten work that month, but he was doing chemo treatments that he needed to stay alive. And the system was a royal pain. Administratively, it was difficult to navigate. And the first thing Doge did was to cut the people and cut funding for people who help you fill out forms. That's not part of the Medicaid part, but it was part of what they did at Social Security. That's how an insurance company runs. Put obstacles in the way of people who are eligible and reduce costs. A final note. I went to a talk by a Princeton economist whose study of Obamacare found the single biggest effect was a decline in the number of deaths of Black boys under the age of 6. More children will die on orders of magnitude substantially greater than the Texas flood from the big ugly bill.
Boy, Mark, I feel like I've been in the flood zone of this conversation from the
Yeah.
get-go. Wow, I'm really quite a the pivot on this is where you're standing is you've been out in front from the beginning of our initiative with the new Untouchables, for example, to respond to the flood the zone, right? That came through Doge, and you've come up with all sorts of intrinsic ideas, and you've expressed, really, everybody's expressed several weeks before we see this hit in the mainstream, things that we see come down the pike. So, for example, last couple of days, we saw, in fact, yesterday, as a matter of fact, I think we saw from the Third Appellate Court the decision on class actions as it relates to birthright citizenship, right? And so that was one of several elements that you've addressed recently. But I wonder if you could pick up there, given some of the decisions that came down this week, and if you could also potentially connect it to this continuation of the revelation of Mr. Bouvet as the Assistant Attorney General of the United States and the revelations, the whistleblower revelations, to open up dialogue with the rest of the group.
Yeah, boy, I learn a lot each week on these, so I appreciate everybody's thoughtful analysis. There's so much to unpack with the big, beautiful bill that we haven't even begun to scratch the surface. And I'm at the same time trying to unpack Ohio's budget. And every day I'm getting a call from somebody that wants to challenge something that's in that. So and it's and many of the same themes apply. But in terms of the big beautiful bill, I was the stunning thing I picked up on this morning on NPR. There was a story about that the budget now for ICE is going to be bigger than the budget for the federal prison system. And that they are poised and have already solicited no bid contracts with all of the Trump supporting private prison companies, and they're going to be that is it's direct graft. That now it's a little indirect to talk about taking people's Medicaid away and giving a tax cut to rich people. It's a little harder to, but here's really direct. They're taking Medicaid money away. They're reducing food SNAP benefits or food stamps, and that money is going been redirected to ICE, and ICE is immediately going to provide billions of dollars to Trump supporting private prison operators on a no bid basis. It's just astounding, and that we're not marching just on something like that. I don't care how much these folks hate people who are different than they are. Nobody likes to have federal funds stolen and redirected based on the benefit of the elected office holders that are doing the directing. So it's just outrageous. I mean, I just the last call I got on the budget on the Ohio budget today, the legislature had a small committee with a staff of two that was overseeing Medicaid spending in Ohio. So it was a check and balance on Medicaid spending. Apparently, in the middle of the night in the budget, with no notice and no hearings, the legislature terminated that committee, which is akin to the efforts to get rid of all of the inspectors general in the federal government. So you've got this horrible contracting, the remaking of Medicaid to benefit those who supported Trump and who are enriching Trump and others in his universe, and um, uh, and there's nobody watching the store, and that's been quite intentional. And it's a trend. And by the way, in Texas, as you know, I love the all the stories about the Texas legislature coming in for a special session to appropriate money to create to build sirens in the place where lightning struck once, in case it strikes twice. But they're also coming in to rejigger their gerrymandering. Um, and that's the more important initiative, and they're doing the same. They're bringing the same initiative here in Ohio to we're going to go from four Democratic Congresspeople to probably one or two at most in a new redistricting initiative that's going to take place this summer. Same in Texas, and so but it goes along with the theme. If you can't win, change the rules. If and the one thing they can't change so far is the courts. And so to your question about it was actually a district court in New Hampshire that did exactly what the Supreme Court invited it to, which is to provisionally certify a class of children born in the United States of parents who were not United States citizens, and then granted an injunction to that entire class. Whether that will hold up, the judges paused that order pending appeal to the First Circuit, and then ultimately it'll go to the Supreme Court. And we'll see just how hypocritical Amy Coney Barrett and some of the I guess the non-Alito Thomas wing of the Trump court are going to be if they reverse themselves in just a couple of weeks over their suggested remedy for nationwide injunctions. It'll be really interesting to see, but I'm not optimistic. I grow less optimistic every day watching what's going on.
Well, I just call it the state of affair of Trumpism at the moment, right? And Bill and Paul, I've seen some incredible stuff come out through my colleague Eric Vaughn recently, just reminding us of the earlier days where we connected, of a lot of the deregulation and, of course, the criminal activity that preceded all of these things. We've had the conversation before, but I always found myself thinking, is anyone surprised by this at the moment? And the answers from you guys previously have been, of course not. This is kind of the rule of thumb that you should expect things to continue in a downward cycle if we don't deal with the problems. But here we are. So the question, arising from, some potential good news based on birthright citizenship in the class and everything else. Obviously, from a legal standpoint, it's very difficult to get these classes together. I don't want to ask too much of a technical question here, but do you see any upside from this decision in context to at least lifting up, I don't know, a judicial response, I guess, to Trump overreach?
I don't think there's any question that there is, and this was the perfect storm. It's very easy to identify who are children that would be children born after a certain date, who were not, who were reclassified under the Trump executive order. The trick in a class action is well, there's four or five tricks, but one of them is you have to be able to identify the people in the class. And for many of these things, it gets more complicated. And identifying people that have actual standing. So, for example, in certain circumstances, associations can bring lawsuits and seek injunctions, but those associations aren't qualified to become class representatives. So, if you're relying on associational standing to seek a remedy to a constitutional violation, then you're out of luck in terms of an injunction until there's a complete adjudication of the case, I suppose. So those are the kinds of challenges that are there. But yes, I mean, it's a good sign. we go to work and we certify classes all the time in our in our office, and so it's something people can do, but it is a long, uh, hard road to get there. And by the way, class certification is one of the very few things in the federal judicial system that is subject to an immediate appeal. And so if a class gets certified 100% of the time, nobody has to make an exception. That issue can be appealed immediately. And you saw that. I'm sure it's already been appealed. Again, it's gonna create mountains of uncertainty. And just like the concerns about the federal employees. I mean, where Marco Rubio is winding up to fire, you know, hundreds or thousands of people in the State Department, and the Supreme Court took the reins off of any of that, even though there was a federal judge in California that found that they were very likely to succeed on the merits, and that the kind of reducing the staff the way they want to do it is illegal. So, but again, there's not a lot in common between somebody who works in the State Department and somebody who works at the CFPB. I mean, that becomes a more challenging proposition for the lawyers. But good lawyering is we're all going to be sharpening our skills, I guess, over the next few years.
Bill, can you comment on the the Trump's tariff initiative with Brazil?
Yes, so it's both Trump's initiative with Brazil and Trump's threats to the Israeli Supreme Court are linked. And in both cases, these are fellow authoritarian, corrupt leaders who were in danger of already prosecuted or in danger of prosecution, in some cases already convicted. And Trump wants these people as his allies. And of course, he hates the concept that a king can be subject to the rule of law. That's a bad international precedent from his perspective. Plus, as I say, this chance to get alliances that might be useful to him personally in the future. So with Brazil is actually a nation that has significant trade with the United States of America, actually, as does Israel. So what leverage does Trump have with a nation like Brazil, where the head of state is a lefty who was falsely imprisoned, by the way, through perjured testimony, and a corrupt judge, and then when that was overturned, won the election, and then very much like Trump, Bolsonaro, who was the corrupt Brazilian guy, his forces tried for a coup in Brasilia, which is the capital of Brazil. And so there's prosecutions of all these things by the new head of state, who's quite an opponent of Trump. So, in Brazil's case, he's got lots of folks he would like to attack, and the tariff tool is now the only thing he has. And so he's threatening to cause significant hardship in Brazil, but only in a way that will cause significant hardship in the United States if he does that. Now, he can't so credibly threaten tariffs on Israel because, after all, the head of state is with him. He's trying to find some form of leverage that he can use against the Israeli Supreme Court. And the setting there is that Netanyahu and his wife are both subject to prosecution for corruption efforts. So that's the setting in that situation.
And just to follow the thread, Bill. So I think this has links to sort of almost everything he's done. So we know that tariffs are supposed to be the prerogative of Congress, right? That's what it's supposed to be. What he has done is he said he needs to do this because there's an emergency out there, right? And so now we have a surplus with Brazil. Brazil buys more than we sell them. We have a surplus with Brazil. Number one. Number two, it exposes the fact that it's not an emergency, right? So I think at the end of the day, this is going to the extent the courts still hold, this is going to expose the whole scenario that Trump has created, that this is an emergency, in order to have the power to impose these tariffs without Congress's assent or approval. And again, this is what autocracies do, right? They wear down. We have a non-equal branch of our government right now, Congress, which, by the way, is supposed to be the most powerful branch, but now they end up being the weakest branch. And then we have courts that are still holding. We have the U.S.'s biggest law firms, 9 of them who have capitulated to Trump. So what he's doing has been working. But I think the mistakes that they're making in this Brazil tariff has exposed the flagrance of their bullshit. And I think that that's going to help at least those people who are arguing in court that these tariffs and all this other stuff is a bunch of bullshit. And I think that I'd love for the other lawyers on this call, on this Zoom call, to either disagree or agree with me. But one of the features of courts' review of executive power has been the presumption of regularity, right? So ever since, I think, Roosevelt, this doctrine of the presumption of regularity has been the thing that sort of blesses the executive orders, blesses the work of somewhat of the executive branch with the court systems. What's going on right now is there should be no presumption of regularity because it's all bullshit, right? It's all gerrymandered and rigged, and there shouldn't be the presumption of regularity. Yet courts are still giving these executive orders sort of the presumption of regularity, which I think, what Emil Bove, what's exposed in his sort of emails that we've seen where he's been saying "fuck the courts" and that type of thing. They have no regard for the courts. They have no regard for ethics and regularity of law and what the department's supposed to do and what the executive branch is supposed to stand for. So I think and I hope that the next thing the courts do is start eviscerating this ridiculous presumption of regularity that the executive branch doesn't deserve anymore.
Well, and Paul, I think part of what's keeping them from the courts from doing that is the fear that they're going to that these folks who only see power as might will call their bluff and start to directly violate court orders. And so I think that's the fear, and I think it's a legitimate fear on the part of those judges. It's a really challenging time, and I wouldn't want to be a federal judge right now, not only because I'm probably going to be under death threat if I do anything that's contrary to the administration, but also because these were tough. This is tough, and navigating a way through that just using words is a historic challenge.
Look, this has been the most shocking. I mean, we've had several, but I think recording to date of really just everybody emotively sharing these unbelievably transparent realities. But I have to ask you an open question. I'm just going to ask you to please riff on this for a moment. I don't want to delve into the salacious aspect of all things Epstein. But Epstein, of course, created a rift in MAGA this week, but they were all questioning the Department of Justice, which I think we all want, right? And as well as, maybe the credibility of, regardless of their entry point, but in terms of people being aware of obviously, just the ramifications, especially where you guys have come from in your career specifically, but as it relates to, obviously Pam Bondi and just the state of affairs at the Department of Justice. I would love to hear you guys roundtable on this.
Well, conspiracy theories have been the lifeblood of the MAGA movement, right? And so now they're living in their now they're on the tip of that spear, because now they're going to have to, now that they're governing, they're going to have to now answer to probably debunk these bullshit conspiracy theories about Epstein. Now, I think there's a lot of that Trump fears in there. I doubt there's tapes of Trump having sex with young ladies, and I think there's a lot of things in there that have nothing to do with Trump that people fear. But I love it, because now they're having to explain to the MAGA following that a lot of these conspiracy theories have no basis to them. So I'm enjoying it.
So let me give you the finance part. Epstein was a moron. He had no training in finance, and a whole bunch of the most elite CEOs in America and the UK and lords and things like that were paying him tens of millions of dollars, cumulatively, probably in the hundreds of millions over time, for investment advice, a subject that he had no understanding of, no skills, no background, and such. Nobody believes that story. That story is complete BS that was, being done for investment advice. This is how he got paid off. You know, they have testified that there were cameras in the rooms. Now, does anyone seriously think he didn't blackmail these folks to get the money? How else did he get the money, right? From folks who were vastly more financially sophisticated than him. So, as to the fundamental, um, again, there was a carefully crafted thing about no credible evidence. Well, you're not going to have direct evidence unless you actually did an investigation. And what are you going to see? Well, are the guys going to admit that they gave $9 million to him because they were blackmailed? Of course they're not. They're going to say, well, I know, I just really valued his advice. So you're, in some DOJ sense, we were, a bunch of us were DOJ attorneys. You're not going to have a case that you can make. But in reality, sure as hell, that's what was going on. So none of us know who all the folks were that were on these cameras. Similarly, this whole thing about the word list is preposterous, right? Of course, there's not a list, but there is a vast amount of information from which any investigator creates a list. In fact, that's among the first things we do as we read these things, is we start creating lists of the critical people, right? So yes, there was a list. It just wasn't called a list, type of thing. And assuredly, some investigator put together a list. In fact, one would think that several investigators, because there were different agencies involved, put together those lists. So yes, I absolutely agree with Paul. It's fun to see them hoisted on their own petard, and they're bad liars, like as in, I've got the list on my desk.
Right.
That's a bad lie.
So
All
let
of
me
us would have so much fun in a cross-examination.
let me
Yeah.
just say one thing about the point that Bill has made about financial crimes, and we've made this point for years with you, Patrick, and failure to tackle elite financial fraud leads to more elite financial fraud and more crime. If Bill talked about, well, he's not a financial expert. Well, in the early 90s, the first $1 billion Ponzi scheme was Towers Financial. He was the number two, Epstein was the number two person in Towers Financial. They went after the principal, Hoffenberg, and and they never went out of Epstein, and they never found the money. And so I think
Uh,
my personal view is that the genesis of Epstein's economic brilliance was his theft of this. I don't want to say he took all the $1 billion, but his theft of the $1 billion or a little bit less from Towers Financial that they never found, and they never went after Epstein. And again, it's once the DOJ doesn't do their job. Remember, they didn't do their job in the prosecution of Epstein for child rape. And sex trafficking. They didn't do their job there. So each step of the way, the Department of Justice created a monster by not doing its job. So I think that, this is another object lesson in that.
Yeah. Can I jump into this?
Yes,
So
please do.
I want to go back to the family values issue. One of the things that I find fascinating about this are the conspiracy theorists, projection and confession. So they've been obsessed with this child sexual abuse, Pizzagate, supposedly involving Hillary Clinton from the beginning. And almost none of it is true. But the Epstein conspiracies, there's a whole lot there we don't know. So you can start. Trump has a relationship with him. They've been friends for years. He's commented on it. He's on tape. There is a woman who sued Epstein and Trump because she was raped at Mar-a-Lago. Um, so you've got lots of smoke. Um, all of Trump's close associates, Olivia Troy, people who know uh, um, and Elon Musk and a variety of other people suggest that Trump is acting like he has something to hide. What? We don't know. But the possibilities are endless because you have not only the direct question, who's having sex with whom and which underage girls, but also things like the original prosecution, which was, he got home confinement. I mean, he was treated with kid gloves, and the guy in charge of it, Acosta, became Secretary of Labor. Hey, we don't have a full account of that story. There's apparently rumors of a discussion of pardons of Jeffrey Epstein in the White House. We don't have that story. You've got simultaneously allegations in the conspiracy world that Steve Bannon is one of the people named in the Epstein files, and Steve Bannon calling for appointment of a special prosecutor. Is this theater? It's classic Trump stuff. Um, and so, but the reporter with Miami Herald, who has followed this for years, did a podcast in the last day or so in which he said, yes, there are a lot of unanswered questions. Even the suicide, which, most independent observers think is probably a suicide, she's saying, there are a lot of suspicious things. The medical examiner that the Epstein family hired thought there are a lot of strange things that haven't been explained, including the fact that the cameras in the Epstein hallway weren't working. So again, there are all kinds of things that could be legitimately the subject of a serious investigation. For me, the issues are the question of why he was treated so gingerly first time around. That's a story that deserves to be investigated. But what's really going on with this cover up is the embarrassment factor. I mean, you don't have to find that, a smoking gun leading to criminal liability for Donald Trump or his associates. Simply having been in the room, having discussed what was going on, and, there apparently is credible evidence, according to some podcasts, that Epstein based his recruiting of overseas underage models on a model of operations Trump was using to also recruit models for his beauty pageants and other kinds of things. The embarrassment factor in that is enormous, even if there's no criminal liability. There's
I,
just so much. that could be
I,
ignored.
I'm a lot more cynical about this. I think this is just a way to keep our eye off the ball of the stuff that they're doing to regular American people through the big beautiful bill and everything. Every minute of coverage and discussion that goes towards Epstein. I mean, Junior, I'm 100% right. Prosecutable stuff is all over this. Obvious, it's obvious, but it pales in comparison to the tens of millions of people who are going to die in Africa, to the Trump supporters who are going to die in ambulances on the way to a hospital that's 100 miles away while they're having a heart attack. Um, it pales in comparison to the looting of the federal treasury for the benefit of Trump supporters and his own family. Exemplified best this week by what's going to go on with the private prisons and immigrants. The funding of ICE that's gonna literally ramp what we see in Los Angeles to every city in America and more. I mean, they have just basically unlimited funding. And think about the kind of people that want to go to work for ICE at this time in history. I don't think they're people that value constitutional rights and protections. I'm just taking a crazy guess at that.
I,
Um,
I might
but
also I might also add that imagine if they're mercenaries, a lot of these guys, because of Blackwater and Eric Prince that nobody talks about. But if I may, because we're running out of time, I just want to insert this because I do think that it wasn't my intent, but it's such an extraordinary point from this perspective, guys. Everybody's talking about crimes that took place over 2 decades ago, right? And suddenly it's right in front of our face, like it never left. And there's more questions than ever before. Meanwhile, on this roundtable of the new Untouchables, the collection of your work, your prosecutions, everything that you've been involved with is literally monumentally larger. Now, I'd be remiss, and I wanted to take this opportunity to say this over several podcasts, and I never got a chance to do it. But Paul Peltier was quoted in one of the greatest investigative research series I've ever seen by the ICIJ, the International Investigative
Consortium of Investigative Journalists.
Consortium of Journalists.
Exactly, and I apologize for butchering that, but my head's just screaming forward about the FinCEN files because a lot of the nature and the magnitude of what took place with Epstein is the financial part of it, and we know that Chase was involved. We know that Bank of America was involved. We know that there was a number of major hedge funds involved. This is all up your expertise and the types of questions you would have been asking when you had the opportunity. And Paul saying $1 billion goes missing at the beginning. Meanwhile, we know trillions of dollars have been manifested through this scenario globally that seems like the dark economy into the American financial system by way of this FinCEN file research that Paul was, really, I mean, we were talking about 2 million suspicious activity reports that went unfiled to the Justice Department. So what this does is it brings it full circle to why we have the new Untouchables to begin with, in my opinion, is to remind the American people that there are professionals in our system that are on the screen that know exactly how to deal with these sorts of the magnitudes of problems that we've been dealing with for a long time. But with the advent, well, let's just put it this way, with the failure of previous administrations that we've seen a continuation of a downward spiral, it's led to this thing that has overrun this conversation today, guys, where we started with literally the devastation that takes place every week to the revelation that millions of people are going to die. And if that's not profound enough, I don't know what else is. I want to give everyone a chance, even though I barely touched everything that we wanted to get into today. Everybody a final comment, and then I'm going to do some promotion of our efforts moving forward. But let's just start with you, June. Final thoughts for today's session.
Sure. So I see Trump winning the battles and losing the war. One of the things about the flood in Texas is it locks in the connection between Trump budget cuts and the importance of government. we've spent our adult lifetime listening to the attack on government. We need to say government is important. Uh, the Epstein files. Um, you want criminality and corruption up front. There it is, front and center. And the counterpoint, effective government, uh, Steve Bannon calling for the appointment of an independent counsel. The ironies abound. But ultimately, what I'm hearing from the variety of sources is, what is Trump doing in response? uh, he's causing turmoil. That the latest going after Brennan and Comey is an effort to distract from Epstein that outrages the order of the day. And the question we have to ask is, after he's done destroying the US government, the US economy, the system of justice, and the global financial order, how do we put it back together?
Bill, do you mind if I ask you for closing comment?
Yeah, so anybody that actually cares about people would never start with efficiency. They would start with government effectiveness. Do you get your mission done successfully? Because when our mission isn't done successfully, horrific things happen. In many centers, people die. In other things like financial regulators, you get something like the Great Financial Crisis. An absolute catastrophe that the world has still not recovered from and will not for another 15 years in terms of lost GDP and such. And far, far, far too many Democratic office leaders are part of that problem that have basically been immensely hostile to the government of the United States of America, the people actually in the trenches. And that's got to stop, because if the Democrats get back in charge and do the same type of stuff, they will end up out of office very quickly, and someone potentially much, much more competent than Trump and every bit as evil will be what comes next.
Mark, that feels like it's encompassed what we've been leveling for the last several weeks, particularly as it relates to maybe the ineffectiveness of the Democratic Party to find its footing here. But I'm hearing clarity on this dialogue without question. Please give us closing thought.
Well, I think we have to answer not with political statements, but with actions. And we need to continue to do that. I mean, we had a little moment of that this week in Ohio when the legislature appropriated $600 million of unclaimed funds to give to billionaire Jimmy Haslam, and we sued. And we told them before that we were going to sue if they did it, because it's unconstitutional. It's a taking, classic taking. There's no due process of law. It was passed in the middle of the night in the budget, along with a whole bunch of other really horrible things, in violation of the state's single subject rule. And we're going to fight back. Every opportunity that arises to do that. They took the Democratic leadership away from the state teachers, the $30 billion state teachers retirement fund in Ohio, where they reduced the majority of the board members used to be participants in the plan, and now they're people appointed at the pleasure of statewide elected officials. It's happening here. It's happening everywhere in Texas. While everybody's paying attention to the flood stuff, they're going to be cutting the Democrats out of the congressional delegation this week. We got to fight back. We got to challenge the constitutionality of that. We have to in court, in deeds, in protests. It all needs to continue, and we can't rely on the Democratic Party for shit right now. I mean, I don't know what else to say. I mean, it's they're completely ineffective, and the office holders are completely ineffective in their defense of the big beautiful bill. There were theatrics, but I don't know where I saw it. But when Chuck Schumer's big accomplishment was getting the name of the bill changed, and that's the big Democratic win for the week. That's shameful and it's embarrassing, and
Mark, Mark, he also sent a strong letter.
that's right. He did send a strong letter too. That's right. And you know what? I think there's a lot to be said for replacing some of these very old, very tired, very of the system leaders in the Democratic Party with younger people who actually are going to execute on ideals and to shake the system up and hopefully that as in New York City that takeover will continue.
Well, I want to pick up on that, Paul, because if a young person comes up in the example that Mark just provided, obviously in Zohan Mondani, but what I find myself trying to project to him and his campaign people is you've got to pay attention to the new Untouchables. You got to pay attention to world that came before, because without the details of what's been going on, you're like the billionaires are going to be shooting you like fish in a barrel. Quite frankly, you've been in the trenches fighting this stuff forever. What's your final say on today's discussion?
Well, I don't want to be as depressing as Mark was, so I'm gonna follow up on what June said, and that is, I think that um, in the end, there's still going to be a lot of suffering, but I think that Trump is winning some of the battles, but I think he's going to lose the war. And I'd like to focus just for a minute on just the incompetence of administration and how that plays out. I think on what people see and what people understand. So we know about Kristi Noem, right? She doesn't approve. She has this requirement now where you have to approve. She has to approve $100,000 payments personally, anything over 100,000. Think of this disaster world. I mean, there's nothing that doesn't cost 100,000 in order to fix it. So it takes them 3 days to actually activate on the scene. I think people see that. I think people can understand that. Where's the head of FEMA? Where's the head of FEMA? This is the guy Richardson didn't even know there was a hurricane season, right? Has no experience at all in disaster relief. So this government is larded with incompetence, and that will come to root over time, right? We've seen. I don't even want to talk about the economy and those people that are advising him. We start this week. Hegseth stopped shipments of weapons to Ukraine, and the president claims he didn't even know, right? And they're denying. So this stuff people see, and it will I believe it will have an impact in the end. I mean, people are dying in the Ukraine, people are dying here, and this is all a consequence, or much of it is a consequence to the obvious incompetence of these people that this idiot has put in charge. I hope in the end that people's eyes will be open to that.
Eric, and you've been so patient, and I apologize. I hope you didn't feel sidelined here, but you were one of the greatest listeners. You and I have lapped this country probably, I don't know, 10 times together, trying to aggregate all of this information that, of course, Paul had said earlier in the broadcast. He's been telling us for years, right? This
Right.
information alongside some of our mentors here and the people that we are so fortunate to know. But last word to you, man. Pretty
Right.
wild and powerful conversation today.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I am happy to take a back seat when we have these voices surrounding us. Those are the holders of the information that need to be heard. But just to make a couple comments, I mean, we were talking about the fecklessness of the Democratic response to anything. I mean, listen to everything that has just been spoken about just in the last 5 minutes, right? And what are the Democrats doing? They're attacking Zoran Mamdani. If they put half the effort that they're putting in to Mamdani, one of their own, right? To anything that's being done out there while the government is crumbling and burning to the ground, there might be some traction with something. I mean, you know, the best responses that we have, other than Schumer, right, like you said, is what Cory Booker doing a filibuster when there wasn't really anything to filibuster, and Hakeem Jeffries talking a little bit longer, just to make things inconvenient. Not in none of these cases is there actual any kind of efficacy to what they're doing. It's all show. It's all show. It's all performative. And until the Democrats can figure out a way to actually address issues rather than just be performative and try to win some points amongst each other, nothing positive is going to happen from them, which goes back to the point that I always seem to be making is that it's up to us. It's up to the regular people of this country to listen to folks like we have here and make things happen because it ain't coming from any kind of a opposition party. I'll tell you that.
Well, just if I can for 2 seconds, I think so. I think we have to be a little bit fairer to the Democratic Party. They're not in charge. It's very difficult to get a voice when you don't have a leader out there. Number one, Obama's shut up for some reason. Biden can't talk. So we have no leadership, and I think that's going to come. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of the governor of California, but he's fighting back in a way I think that's very effective, and he's pushing right back on Trump. And I think that when you have leadership like that, people who are willing to get in the gutter and fight, I think that's helpful. I think they'll coalesce. I think they'll be able to, at least in the districts where they need to. Remember, there's no presidential election in 26. They're going to have to be fighting in the districts where they're purple or where they have a fighting chance. And I think that that's all about getting candidates that are electable. Really good candidates are electable. For the 2 years after that, that's when we have to find a leader in the Democratic Party who's not Schumer, he's not someone who's going to actually motivate and activate people. So I think that I think we're a little bit premature in trying to find that leader. It doesn't exist right now, but I hope he or she is out there.
Well, I agree, but it reminds me, we didn't even get a chance to talk about that insanity yesterday in Central Valley, California, with ICE running through the fields and how that looked on camera and I mean, just the tragedy of that. But, I'll finish that. I hope that people watching this will like, share, and subscribe, learn, get this to everybody who needs to get this information. But more importantly, dive into the information that we've been providing. It's incredible. We have more coming down the pike. We're creating a new Substack page where articles are going to be generated by everyone on this panel, as well as plans, efforts moving forward that encompass on our channel, thenewuntouchables.com, both on YouTube. We have a new V1 website that's going to be launched. I would encourage everybody to watch Eric Vaughn's Corruption Incorporated, The American Way. You can see that on YouTube and other affiliate social media. And I'll, of course, and I apologize to everyone. I didn't introduce everybody at the beginning. We just launched right into it. But I'll have descriptions down below of who everyone is and links to their information and writings and so on and so forth. And I would also encourage everybody to check out our website, thecleannewdeal.org. And maybe most importantly, please check out thecon.tv, which is where we've met everybody on this incredible panel of the new Untouchables. So we're out of time. Guys, thank you so much. Let's hope that there's not as much tragedy next week, but I have a feeling there might be more. So thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll talk soon. All the best.